Hey, folks, welcome to Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres.
And I'm Thea. And Ceres, how are you feeling this week?
Oh boy, I'm on edge.
Really? I'm feeling like investing 3 years of my life into a project, really hoping it will pay off.
Oh, yeah. So, what are we talking about this week?
This week we're talking about the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we recently finished after 3 years of playing.
Yeah.
Under my guide as the Sage DM.
And my guys as an annoying player.
Well, let's get into it.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Edge of Extinction. So, maybe a couple of words about the campaign itself. This campaign was conceived by me to be a dark fantasy campaign, first and foremost. So, uh, I didn't want everyone to always be like super serious at the table, obviously. D&D necessarily always has a certain level of humor at the table, but it was always meant to be kind of taken seriously. Like the world, we take it seriously, we take the plot seriously. Um, we
I
don't
think it's
have sex with
also.
the dragon unless it's in character, you know.
I think it's also part and parcel of how you tell stories. That this campaign was, I want to say, in a way, very literal. In the sense that it wasn't like really vibes based, but more, if this were to exist in the real world, how would it be? You know,
Yeah,
that like perpetually in a lot of your world building, I find you perpetually answer the question: if this fantasy concept was real, how would we actually experience it? How would people exploit it as a resource or fear it? Because whatever. What are the implications of knowing that the gods are real for a society or something like that? So I feel like that lends itself to sort of merges also with the dark fantasy aspect of it. Is very much an exercise of what if humanity actually lived in the ecosystem that appears to be, portrayed by the monster manual. Where in the food chain would you find them?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for a little bit of context, so the whole premise of Edge of Extinction is kind of what Ceres just described. So the idea is it's even pushed further than that. It's what if there were no planes of existence, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and all the creatures of the monster manual lived on the same plane. So it's not just your owl bears or your
Trolls or
I don't
whatever.
know. Yeah, exactly. Your trolls and your ogres, but it's also like what if the devils and all the aberrations and the demons and all the undead? What if they all shared the material plane?
Yeah.
And it would be
And
terrible. It would
understandably,
be
in that Yeah, I mean, understandably, in that constellation, humans, unless they are very heroic and very magical or very technologically advanced, are kind of in a pretty rough position, right? Like, the average human is not stronger than the average devil, the average human is not stronger than the average mind flayer, and so on and so forth. It's a system that, and humans kind of seem to be the universal prey species for all of for all of these groups. So it's pretty dark to begin with. It's kind of a scary concept. And your idea was the only way that humanity could really survive is kind of in a far off nook of this world, sheltered and hidden by mountain ranges. And, sort of, I remember early on, we
that was the
often used to,
pitch.
yeah.
Yeah.
We early on, we sort of suggested often, or we called it the Chernobyl in Switzerland campaign.
No, Switzerland and Chernobyl. Like
You're
you
right. Yeah,
are,
that's what it was.
it's you are in this mountain. Basically, humanity survives in this mountain region where then mountains allow for natural protection, and
Yeah,
also these mountain ranges, they are literally at the edge of the world, so very far away from the epicenter of where all the monster politicking is happening. But
yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it later. Maybe it's almost a spoiler, but there is a second way that humanity survives, in a way.
Well, actually, no. I think you should talk about it now because you're right. That was the pitch that you gave to us, but the mystery that we
Yeah,
uncovered during the course of the campaign was,
that humanity actually survives, actually everywhere. And the way that it survives is because, um, much like Ceres always described earlier about me kind of taking apart the tropes and figuring out what if this was real. All these monsters, these devils, these aberrations like mind flayers and all the undead, they don't just reproduce. They aren't just born, they're people made into that. And so humanity is kind of the bottom of the chain of transformation that goes from mundane humans to whatever you need. So
yeah,
devils are just humans, and mind flayers, they're it's hard to call them humans, but they're like almost like they're the mind flayer is a parasite that needs humans to survive. So humanity outside doesn't live. That humanity survives not as free individuals, but more like cattle. But they
yeah.
survive because they're kept alive.
Although obviously for a D&D game and for like a regular Thursday table, you never went as dark with that concept as like one potentially could. Like you didn't go like full Planet of the Apes, like all humans are enslaved and used as like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
of course. There's different degrees to it, and every monster type basically has kind of like a society that is kind of built around their or not completely, but partially built around whatever
Yeah,
the biological method is that they transform humans into
yeah.
whatever they are.
Or
So for
maybe it would be
devils,
slightly more accurate to say for your world that every major civilization is a monster that has a monster type that has identified a way to use humans like this. Because I
yeah,
remember you also talking about, there are also other monsters that are just monsters. They're just predatory or
sure,
whatever,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
But
yeah.
all the
But those
major
are
civilizations are always built around some kind of coordinated, like the devils, the mind flayers,
yeah,
vampires, I think was one.
yeah. We never went into Dragonborn, but my Dragonborn one is pretty cool. I think
I
it's pretty
I know
interesting.
you think it's really cool because you keep like half telling me about it, but you
I know, I
you
know.
won't
I like
commit
them.
because you
I
think we might
know
revisit this world.
exactly. Like, yeah, I like my Dragonborn place very, very much.
so
um,
so much for the world. A little bit of context for the campaign, maybe. We started this campaign during COVID. It was locked down for at least some of us. We played it for about 2 years, and then took an 8-month intermission because some of our players couldn't play, and then came back after our 8 months intermission with a quite a changed rosters of players. We had 3 players in the beginning. We swapped out 2 after the intermission. So I'm the only consistent player who's actually played the whole thing, along with you. I mean, I guess the DM is a player in a sense, but Um, and after the intermission, we also changed
a
quite a few
player,
things.
but
So
we all understand that the dungeon master is not supposed to have fun the way the other players do.
um, but yeah,
That was a
so
joke.
that's why I laughed at it. Um, yeah, so we played for 2 years. We took an 8-month hiatus, and we came back to it kind of stronger than ever. To be honest, I feel like the last year was the strongest of the two. But we're going to be talking about the plot and the characters of sort of the whole
It's
campaign,
definitely where
all
we
three
had the
years.
most players who were like committed to the bit and really
Yeah,
wanted to go into the lore and take it seriously.
yeah,
No shade, but that's
yeah.
what it felt
Exactly.
like.
That's an important point, right? So in the first campaign, or in the first half of the campaign, we had me, who was very into the lore and taking notes and was taking the whole thing very
Some
seriously,
would
which
say
was
too
this.
much.
Yeah, no, for sure. We can get into that too.
Hmm?
Um, but we also had two other players who sort of had trouble keeping up with stuff and remembering stuff and weren't as interested in playing, especially like a combat heavy, lore heavy game, because it was just not the place that they were in. And that's not a criticism of them, that's just an incompatibility between the concept and pitch of the campaign and the players that we had to play with, right?
Yeah, in
Um,
hindsight, we should have definitely talked more about the campaign. Like my pitch, dark fantasy campaign,
yeah,
was like the whole pitch I gave you guys, and then we went into session 0. But on session 0, we talked more. It was more like presenting the world and what do you want to play,
yeah,
and we never really addressed the style of game because I
yeah.
guess we kind of all thought that there was one style of game, and then we all met, and it turned out there isn't only one.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, and not to plug our own material too much, but we didn't have the one D&D argument worth having at the start
Yeah,
of the game, which was like, uh, what is the point, and what makes this fun, and how casual is it, and how not casual is it?
yeah,
Um, but so we
as
learned a lot. I think that's why that's why the final arc, that's why the third year of the game, I think, was the strongest, because
yeah,
we learned a lot and we had people join who were following the same assumptions of what makes the game fun as we had, or more similar at
yeah.
least.
And also, I think I was pitching the game better. Like our final player that we added, I definitely went to her, going like, "Listen, this game, like we take it seriously. The lore matters,
Yeah.
and we're not above fart jokes and dick jokes at the table, but like within the fantasy of the story,
Yeah.
we take that part seriously."
Yeah.
And I think it worked out really well. Okay, but I'd say enough teasing.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me a little bit about the specific setting. Where did the campaign take place?
Okay. The campaign took place in a world that has no name, as far as I can tell. Um, in the narrower confines of the Elysium. The Elysium is a kingdom, or at least a monarchy, that is ruled by a council of 5 priests and watched, one of them being the monarch, and is watched over by 5 matriarch goddesses, which are called the matrons. And the Elysium is like, again, like we said earlier, a small secluded corner of the map, basically just a small valley between mountain ranges, and not much more than that. Um, which notably has a large human population and I think also notably large defensive structures where the walls fail, like these gigantic walls. Sorry, where the mountains fail, gigantic walls have been built, shield walls
Yeah,
that
basically the
are not
valleys.
possible with the technology that we have. Um, like not possible with the Elysian technology of the current day. And it's about 300 years after the founding of the Elysium,
Yes, and
and
400
400
years.
years since the advent of magic. So it's one of these worlds where it was a mundane world and then something happened. But unlike Shadowrun or something like that, where the magic has just shown up or shown up in the last 50 years, this is kind of already semi-ancient history. Um,
Yeah, like
in
but we
fact,
still have like first generation elves running around.
right. So elves live super long in this setting, and dwarves do too, which is actually very important for the further plot of the story. And I think that is something interesting to note, because the only people who have survived from that day are elves. So literally nobody is alive who lived before magic,
Yeah,
as I understood it.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, correct. Because like the world was mundane, like our world. Like there was
Yeah.
literally
So
no
people didn't like
magic, only
turn,
humans.
because in Shadowrun, like when magic comes into the world, people turn into orcs who are humans, and
Mm,
then they continue to have orc babies. But that's not the case with your setting, right?
no, they're
Yeah,
basically like the big blast affected mainly like it was just women who were pregnant at the time.
yeah,
All a bunch of babies got turned into weird stuff. But if you're already a person, you either got some weird mutation or you just
yeah.
stayed a person. Like
And
maybe
I
you
think
turned into a
that's
sorcerer
exactly.
or you
I think
grew a
that's
tentacle.
I think that was very interesting, is because although the advent of magic was in some ways ancient history, for some people in the population, it was still within living memory, and the days before magic were one generation beyond living memory. So it
Yeah,
could
it's
feel
like
at the
this
same
this
time recent and distant.
yeah, so for now, it's like it was 400 years ago, but also those are the stories that my dad used to tell me about the world before I was
Yeah.
born. So,
Yeah, and so the Elysium contains two major ethnic population groups, the Emirians and the Khazaren.
mhm,
Emirians were based off of sort of a mix between like Nordic, Germanic, Slavic sort of cultures,
yeah,
whereas the Khazaren were similarly like a pastiche of East Asian cultures.
exactly. Yeah. I
Um,
decided, like I don't know enough about those cultures to like come up with something that doesn't feel like a pastiche. So we'll do a pastiche for the Nordic Central
yeah,
European ones too. So I'm I'm an
yeah,
equal opportunity culture mixer.
yes, and yeah, I mean, there's a few different. Oh, actually, I guess what we should explain also is the five major forces beyond just the government in this kingdom were. I mean, they never actually had a name, but we could call them like the five guilds or whatever.
Yeah,
They were sort of the Red Wolves. Those were the people who guard the borders,
at the
especially in the
mountains.
areas, yeah, especially where there are no walls. So kind of rangery types, people who are sort of a little more outward looking and know a little bit more about what the world outside looks like. Um, then there was the wall keepers. They were obviously a little. Those were the people who guard the walls. So they also guard the border, but they guard the walled portions, which obviously made them a little more. I don't know, traditional, set in their ways, not as flexible in a sense because they sit and
Yeah,
they guard
there's a
the wall,
very
and that's how it's always
literal
been.
and more like social aspect to it, where like on a literal level, the border of the mountain is much more flexible border. It's
Yeah,
much more nuanced. Like it's a gradient. The
yeah,
wall is like a literal cut. Like one side is good, one side is bad. But then also the wall allows the wall keepers to be a lot more protected, and very few monsters would that wanted to storm the Elysium and try to get inside would do it at the walls because the
yeah,
walls are these massive fortifications. So the ones who actually have to interact with monsters all the time are the red wolves. And
yeah,
that also gives them like a different outlook because they actually have to interact with the orcs.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was the Lodge of Good Trade. These were a lot of aristocratic, noble businessmen who,
The trade guild, like the league of
yeah.
like trades and merchants and
And then the
Order
Order
of
of
the
the
Spark.
Spark. That was sort of the research institutions, the universities, the academics. Not really one of the stronger factions, but they did exist. And then the Shepherds of Purity, which were sort of particularly interlinked with the faith and sort of provided spiritual services to rural communities as well as healing and
And help in
medical.
agriculture.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
we never talked about this, but like the Elysium, like the level of agriculture and the amount of food that is produced in the Elysium in those high mountains up there, like that's not naturally possible.
Mm.
Those fields grow so well because of druidic magic from the Shepherds of Purity. And
Yeah,
like generally like the environment inside of the Elysium because of this and also because of another factor which will come up later. Like the inside of the Elysium is a lot more pleasant than the environment outside of the Elysium.
yeah,
Just like there's almost like it's a little bit domed.
yeah. So, let's talk about our characters.
Let's talk about the characters. So the first character that I want to talk about is Fliam.
Mm-hmm.
Fliam is a dwarf, a former farmer who lived in a small town at the edge of the Elysium, right next to the mountains.
FLJEM, for those wondering.
Yeah, Fliam Aspenkiev.
Yes.
And Emirian, as the name might suggest. And he lives in this town called Godamore, which is famous in the Elysium for a tragedy where a very large, fiery devil managed to fly over the border, not being taken down by red wolves, and then kind of like flew down and hit Gadamore, crashed there, where it leveled the town and killed a lot of its population, including Flame's family, while he was out working the fields. And Flame ran away.
Yeah.
And he ran away. He moved to a different district and he joined the Wallkeepers to start a new life, as it kind of
Yeah.
lost everything. And we meet Fliam as he has been He has joined the Wallkeepers for a couple of years now. He's a private. He is a low-ranking soldier, and he is commanded to join uh, an expedition, which we'll
Yeah.
come to later. Now, you want to talk about your character?
Sure. The character I was playing had a really long, noble name, but his last name, his last name and the name that he went by, was Idarian. So his first name was Reynard. Yeah, Idarian came from a noble household, but lived a very ignoble existence. He had sort of an extremely demanding father who was very ambitious and had risen up himself from very little and had sort of pitted his children in constant competition against one another and against the sort of social climbers around them to sort of motivate them to be the best that they could be and put all sorts of pressure on him. Um, Unfortunately, and they were sort of pretty tightly connected with the Order of the Spark. Magic and stuff was sort of the family business, magical research. And unfortunately, Idarian didn't really have the spark of magic as much as he was intelligent and could study. We decided this was sort of a universe where just studying magic isn't enough to be able to become a wizard or something like that. You still kind of need a somewhat innate spark or connection. And if you're a sorcerer, you have a very big innate spark, and if you're a wizard, you have a small one, but you fan it with your knowledge. Anyways, Idarian didn't have that and didn't measure up, so found himself kicked out of his family. He worked as a librarian for a time. He worked in a bar for a time as a bartender. And then as a librarian, he was sort of in the farthest flung part of the Elysium. He finds this eldritch tome, and the kind of the in joke that gets revealed then over time is basically it's like, where's the least likely place somebody's going to look for a very powerful eldritch tome? Well, how about in Podunk U's backwater library, right? So that's where he finds it. He's not supposed to touch any of the books, especially the special books. So obviously he does. He gets caught by an individual, and so he has a very dark opening story because he gets caught by this individual, and they're like, "I'm going to report you," and he's like, "Please no, don't do that. You're going to ruin any opportunity I have to work my way up into academia from the position I'm in right now." And they're like, "Yeah, but you touched the thing. I'm sorry. I have to report you. This is like, you're corrupted by magic now." And then he was like, "No, please don't do that." And the person was like, "Yep, I'm going to do that." And so then he shoots the person in the middle of this confrontation, um, and kills
Accidentally.
them. Yeah, it's like semi-accidental, semi-intentional. His thoughts go there, and then the book responds and shoots like an eldritch blast. So it's like, it's kind of mixed culpability, or it's like he did think about it, but then the book just did it. But he feels very guilty about it, obviously, on some level. And he's got a lot of issues with guilt later on, and he ends up not seeing really the light. He just ends up being like, "I'm justified. This is why I'm justified." Anyways, this is where it gets even darker. He takes the body of the murdered person and he burns their effects and buries them out in the middle of nowhere and stages it and makes it look like this person touched and stole the book and shot him. So he shoots himself for good measure to create like this scar on his side to show that he was the one who was attacked, not the other way around, and that the other person got away with the book, which he pulls off. That went well for him.
For a while.
He doesn't really get caught, and now that his newfound warlock powers have given him this spark of magic, he does end up multiclassing into wizard a bit too. And so now he's got that spark. Now he's got that starting arcane spark, and he can fan it with his ambition and his skill and his knowledge. And he's a very I think he does have very strong bonds with the adventuring party eventually and with the people around him, but he's a very groupish kind of person where the plight of those that he doesn't consider his peers or allies doesn't interest him very much. So he's very ambitious, very groupish, very dedicated, the kind of perfect character to become a controversial great man of history someday.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
boy,
that's him. That's
does
Idarian.
he.
Yeah, and boy does he. It really worked out in the end in terms of storytelling. I don't think that was the best ending for him in terms of his own mental health and what he should have probably aspired to. but I definitely got to tell the story that I wanted to tell with this character of um, this tragic,
Yeah.
ambitious, driven individual.
Yeah. And finally, from our starting set, we have Kohai, the Giga Chad of D&D. Uh, Kohai is starts from like a farmer family, but he is a colossal man and quite good at swordplay. So his only issue is that his name is a pun. Kohai means scary, and he has trouble being scary because first he loves to wear a giant, thick, well-combed mustache on his
Yes.
otherwise cleanly shaved face. And the second point is that he also comes from a more border region, but instead of a giant monster destroying his town, he had came in contact with like a little fey creature. Mysteriously, we never really went into what it was exactly because it's in his childhood, but like he came in contact with something fey-ish like,
Yeah.
and acquired a little bit of fey magic, which allows him to bamf and teleport around, which is very practical.
Yeah.
And it also
And glow with
makes
pink
him
sparkles.
sparkle and glow
Yeah.
with pink sparkles whenever he gets emotional, which really makes it difficult to intimidate.
Yeah.
So that's Kohai. And Kohai joins.
It's kind of funny. I just thought of it. Phleum is from the northwest,
Not really.
and
No, he's from the southwest.
I guess yeah. Okay, so he's from the southwest, and Kohai is from the southeast, and
Yeah.
Idarian is from the capital originally. It's almost a straight line between the three of them.
Yeah, that's true. The the story of Kohai then kind of like he goes and tries to join the Wallkeeper. He's almost like the inverse of Phleum because he first goes and joins the Wallkeepers,
Mm,
learn how to fight better and to get a cool career. And I feel like Kohai's story is almost like a story about of like never really committing
mm,
to like a group or a faction because Kohai then eventually leaves the Wallkeepers because they're too kind of like traditional and set in their ways, and it's too much of like almost like a holy order. And Kohai is really not that kind of guy. He's a fun, outgoing. He likes to drink. He likes to party. So he uses his salary to buy out his own armor and equipment from the Wallkeepers, and then he leaves them.
yeah.
And then he kind of tries to make his fortune as a mercenary, going from job to job, until he is hired to escort an expedition in the region of the forest of Karanek,
Yeah.
and that's where we leave him.
And that's where Idarian. So Idarian is the academic on this expedition. He's not the person leading the expedition. He's just an assistant at this point. Kind of an alchemist who specializes in some historical stuff because he can whatever the magical equivalent of carbon date things is and things like that. So we all find ourselves on this expedition, and the expedition is to a ruin. Somebody's found an ancient ruin, an ancient underground structure that predates the foundation of the Elysium by just a little bit, seemingly.
Yeah, I mean, from what you know, it's kind of funny because like originally the expedition is sent because like someone found some like pottery, like broken pottery and like tool utensils outside of a cave that look
Mm,
very like prehistoric or like very simple. And so it was like, oh, maybe there's something interesting in that cave. Let's go and see. And then, well, actually, why don't you just describe the whole arc, the Forest of Karnak arc?
okay, I mean, I'm gonna skip some of the details
Skip.
for the time. But
Yes.
basically, we go on this expedition. It's an archaeological dig. We've gotten a tip. There might be some stuff to find in this place. So we go there, and what we find instead, a little bit of town resistance. So we start to introduce the fact that some people don't like research and magic in this setting. And I say, okay, cool. But beyond that, we find a tribe of orcs who we know what orcs are. Orcs, from the perspective of Elysians, are these terrible tribal savage people who live outside of the Elysium and threaten the borders. But like in actual fact, orcs are just like any other sentient sapient species. In this setting, they uh, they're just like people. They have all the multitudes of morality and whatnot that we do, and these are just a group of people that happen to want shelter because inside the Elysium is a lot safer and a lot nicer than outside the Elysium, especially for humanoids. So these orcs are living in this cave and are taking shelter there, um, and we end up not getting into a fight with them. They get very anxious basically about security concerns that we're going to tell somebody that they live here or somehow indirectly tell people that they live here.
And they were also warned by someone, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they were warned that we would I don't know, come and do bad stuff. Basically, somebody's been here before us. Who is this person? Um, Eventually, we cool things off with them. We come to an understanding. Everybody's happy. We get to see the orc children playing and making art, and the orc people here living their lives, and it's very sweet. But we are here on an archaeological dig, so they show us that in the back of this cave network, there's kind of almost like a Fallout vault door. That's this is where the ruins get really crazy. And so we go down there and we find the buried city of Helheim, which, as the name implies, is not a particularly pleasant place. It's kind of like an underground bunker city, clearly sort of Emirian in terms of architecture and language,
And
where
religion.
and religion, yeah, where we find some giant spiders that we fight. We find kind of these golem-like survivors. It seems like some people stayed down here and like degenerated over 300 years into like these golem-like creatures who we fight. There's some traps and stuff like that too, but the main gist is we start to figure out, oh, wait a minute, the 5 matrons that we all know and love in the art as they're presented here seem like they used to be very different 400 years ago. First off, they weren't all women. That was one shift. But also in general, they had a darker tone to their titles. The matrons as we knew them were like, the architect and the ruler and the gazer and the... Oh, what were they all? I can't remember. What was the
Which one?
life giver or something like that, but it wasn't that. That was the dark title.
No,
The
yeah,
caretaker.
she's the caretaker.
Right, yeah, the caretaker and stuff like that. But then the old matrons' names are stuff like the All Eye and the Blind Eye and the Dominator and the Life Giver. And it's like, so it seems like the matrons used to have, somewhat of a darker connotation to them. They used to be somewhat different. That's interesting. You would expect a cosmically true god to basically stay the same because they're one entity. We also found this letter about this Eye of Elysium, this strange device that they had, or some sort of thing that they had created, and they were worried about whether or not to turn it on. And we had like this letter. We had archaeological evidence testifying that this some sort of device existed, and that it was dated to the founding of the Elysium, like within a year or so of it. So this gave us some very interesting clues that basically the past is not what it seems to be. And there might be some powerful artifact at the heart of the Elysium that is doing something. And while we're there, we also meet an NPC, a character called Yara, who has fake papers testifying that she's from a university. And I can't remember exactly, but we fight her a bit, and then she tries to trick us. And we call her bluff, and we beat her up. We beat her senseless, and we're like, "All right, we're gonna."
She claimed to be basically like an agent of the deep state,
Yeah,
and that she's like, if you collaborate, you can all get, maybe you can get a position. Maybe I can get you guys to talk with some important people.
yeah.
And then you guys, you called her bluff. You attacked her when she was in a very small space. Bad place for a wizard to be casting big AoE spells.
Yeah. And that was the other thing in this setting, like the most proficient casters in this setting cast like third level spells. And she could cast third level spells because she threatened to cast a fireball. Um so that was pretty interesting because that was like, whoa, that is a lot of magic for this setting. That's a lot of magic for us. So we knock her out, we drag her to the exit, and we talk to the expedition leader and go, you know, we were not sure what the deal is here, but I think she might have been tampering with the ruins. She clearly doesn't belong here. And then we go back in to keep investigating. And when we come back out the second time, everything's been destroyed. So basically, whoever Yara was affiliated with, these shadowy, to us, deep state individuals have completely murdered the orcs. They've completely murdered our caravan. They've completely murdered the rest of the expedition, all the
Yeah.
people we knew. So we bury everybody, but we go into a deep paranoia. We go into a deep paranoia. Everybody that we thought everybody was out to get us. The whole government was out to get us. We had no idea what we were going to do, how we were going to advance our careers or preserve our knowledge or get this information out there. That the past was not as it seemed. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
and that
guys
was sort of the
really,
whole.
yeah, you guys
Yeah,
really, really got paranoid way more than I thought you would. I was like, oh
yeah.
my god, backtrack,
Well,
backtrack, backtrack.
yeah, I mean, I think it was just because so many people got wiped off the map so quickly and we didn't understand what was going on.
Hmm.
And I was playing this very sort of manipulative chess piece sort of character. I was like, oh God, withdraw, withdraw, withdraw. We don't know what's going on. Gather information, then figure out what to do next. We just got super scared. We were very intimidated by this level of power, by this level of magic. We didn't want to get wiped off the map. But we had a few discussions then also, like DM to player. And we're like, you know, it's okay if you guys are seen in public. You don't have to be disguised 24/7. You can, you know, because we sort of faked our death. We sort of pretended we had died in this event as well in order to um, cover our trails because we didn't want any of this to get pinned on us and stuff like that. But then it was
Yeah.
like, no, it's okay if you're seen in public. It's okay if you talk to people. Um, so we came out of our shells a bit more.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think it ended up being that relevant. So to sort of summarize it, in the next arc, we found a local noble person and figured out that his mom was an elf, one of these elves from the start of a firstborn elf. So an elf who lived through the foundation of the Elysium and the coming of magic and all of that. And we were like, oh, we got to talk to this lady about the stuff that we found. Maybe she can shed more light on the situation. And we had to protect this noble from some local extremists. Again, the people who didn't like magical research and who didn't like us and uh, seemed to be somehow really being fostered, like some sort of organization of extremists seemed to be being fostered within um, the Shepherds of Purity. But so
Yeah.
yeah, we helped them with some stuff, and then he agreed to send us on with recommendation to his mom.
Yeah.
This was also a
Maybe
point.
maybe on
Okay.
this arc, it's relevant to point out that like these extremists, they're essentially like, oh, the Elysium lost their way, and you know, the Order of the Spark is doing too much excavating, and soon they'll find something. They'll awake something dark and deep and monstrous inside of the Elysium. These people were led by a mysterious elf
Yeah.
that during this arc, you guys, to make it short, basically found out it was working together with Yara, the wizard.
Yeah. So
So,
now we've got two people as part of this shadowy conspiracy. We've got this elf, and we've got Yara. There was a part here that I did frustrate me to no end, which was we'd sort of faked our deaths, which I thought was quite clever, and then there was a moment on a sending stone where we got called on a sending stone, and I answered. And then they immediately knew who I was, and it was like Yara on the other end, and she's like, "Oh, so you are alive." And I was
mhm.
like, "Ah, damn it. Okay, well, so now they know I'm alive, but they don't know about the rest of the party." And she was like, "Oh, and the rest of the party is here too." And the explanation was kind of like, oh, well, it's like a group call sending stone, and one where you can't disguise your voice or anything on
Yeah.
it or any part of you. And that really frustrated me because I felt like that's a situation where I was playing this cat and mouse game, but I was kind of not allowed to
Yeah. Yeah. I
because we
mean,
didn't have any other sending stones that ever worked like that when
yeah.
yeah, any in any other part of the campaign or prior to that either. It was just like this one sending stone at this one time. It was like, yeah, I know you want to keep hidden from Yara that you guys are all dead, but you don't get to because that's not part
Yeah.
of the plan.
Yeah. That was a bad on my side. Bad DM on my side. But okay. I mean, as you said, this arc was pretty short, not too influential. But the point being is that yeah, this noble's mother is a very important figure of Elysian history and a first blood elf.
Yeah.
So
So
should
not
I take
only
over
was
now?
she sure. I mean, yeah, not only was she important, not only did she see the founding of the Elysium, she was part of it. You know, she was an
Yeah.
instrumental actor in it. And I think that
Yeah.
was really, it's not just anybody's opinion. Imagine if George Washington was still alive and you could ask him how if the Revolutionary War really was how they write about it in the books.
Exactly. And this character is none other than Commander Meika Nagamoto,
Yes.
a Kazaren woman, a fighter of the Red Wolves. So she's on the border in the mountains, and she was there, and she was leading warriors um, to when the Elysium was founded to kind of like clean it up, clean the valleys up from like orcs and other
Yeah.
monsters.
The Rose Knight conquests.
Yeah. At the time, the Wallkeepers and Red Wolves didn't exist yet. There was an order of knights called the Rose Knights. And notably, she's not a big person in charge. Instead, she's just a commander, the local leader of Red Wolves in a monastery in the district of Zedek, because she has had, ever since the foundation of the Elysium, she's had a little bit of an anti-establishment streak and
Yeah.
revolutionary streak. Because the
Oh,
Red
how the
Wolves as
mighty
a whole
fall.
are not very, like, the Red Wolves as a whole, their philosophy is that in the long term, the Elysium cannot survive if it doesn't abandon isolationism and tries to, like, embrace imperialism and tries to, reach outside of the Elysium's current
Yeah.
borders. But that is not the favored policies of the crown. The crown is very isolationist. So the Red
Yeah.
Wolves are like necessary, but don't really have the blessing of the crown, and she wants to change that, and she has tried to change that.
She's also a character who sort of highlights like she how her strength becomes her weakness over time. At first, her strength is the ability to conquer and claim land in the name of humanity, which is important for originally carving out and establishing the Elysium because humans didn't live here post magic. Monsters lived here post magic. And so then when the Emirian and the Kazaren from whatever remote corners of the world they originally hailed from arrived in this space, conquering and claiming land, that was her strength. But then once it was established, that wasn't enough for her, right? So she doesn't change, but the context changes, and so her strength becomes her weakness, and she
Yeah,
falls out of favor.
yeah, absolutely. She is like, same person but 400 years apart.
Yeah,
Very different situation. And she's also tried to basically overthrow the monarchy once, and she kind of did, in the
yeah,
sense that she replaced this kind of crazy king with another
yeah.
noble replacement. But
Mad King
essentially,
so and so.
yeah, but essentially after the change, the new queen, the new monarch with this queen, who was basically like the day before was all like, yeah, Meika, we're going outside, yeah, we're gonna change things, I agree with you. The moment she became the monarch, she kind of flipped on her and was like, no, we're gonna keep things as they are, which
Yeah,
obviously really scarred her and really like made her very untrusting, more than she was before.
yeah,
So with this being said, the party goes up and meets Meika in the monastery and tries to talk with her about the Eye of Elysium. And basically, while they talk about other stuff, Meika doesn't really seem to follow or remember much. But as they mentioned, the Eye of Elysium, Mecha enters with essentially like a panic attack, where she seems to flash memories of the past she doesn't know she has, and at the end of this like panic attack, she claims to have kind of like seen flashes of things like the walls being built, which is another big mystery. How were they built? Who built them? The religion says the matrons built them, the gods built them for humanity. The architect did. But she claims to kind of like have these memories and like
Yeah.
but as soon as she stops flashing, she loses those memories. So it becomes clear that she has some lost memories. And also conveniently, Mecha is employing a scion, an orc,
Yeah.
survivor of a collapsed civilization, who used to be a very cultured man. Well, is a very cultured man, and is employer and uses the supernatural ability of psionics, so essentially mind magic. Specifically, he used to be kind of a royal mind controller and extractor of information.
Yeah.
But he's
A
also
very
very educated.
unsavory job, to be honest.
Very unsavory job. And no, generally he's very educated, so Mecha keeps him around at the edge of the Elysium. He's legally not allowed in, so he has a little hut right outside
Yeah.
the borders. But he gets to live there to share, to share resources with Red Wolves. He has an adoptive daughter, a little girl that he rescued from his crumbling civilization when it was all going down because they were being essentially attacked by mind parasites who were so attracted by all that delicious psionics
Yeah.
that came there to suck them all dry. And this guy, Makba, he basically when he like the party decides to kind of coyly ask him if he could help them get some hidden memories, some memories that have been buried for some reason out of a person. And he's willing to help. Mm, he seems to agree without too much resistance, but he
Yeah.
needs some special psychic mushrooms to enhance his power to really do this,
Yeah.
to get out some memories. So the party needs to go find these mushrooms, which grow outside of the Elysium. He
Yep. We
points
leave
them
the Elysium
towards
for the first time.
Yeah, he points towards the ruins of a former temple of his civilization where they were growing them. It was like a religious temple where they were growing these mushrooms to power up their psionic orc uh, super soldiers. And
Yeah.
so the party essentially agrees, and Mecha officially employs them as mercenary force for the Red Wolves. Working together with a couple of other Red Wolves, one of them very notable, a certain guy called Brunek,
Mm-hmm.
a temporary comic relief NPC, which I created specifically for this arc just to be there.
Yeah.
Um, and the party leaves
Liked making food out of bugs. Couldn't
like making
eat
food out
shit.
of bugs. Yeah, it should. Brunek is filthy. So the party leaves and essentially is employed by the Red Wolves, who are currently fighting this war against an invading orc faction called the Kosnos, a tribe
Mm.
that is desperately seeking to break into the Elysium and plunder their resources after their own food reserves were destroyed by monsters.
Yeah.
And so they're fighting for their lives, and the Red Wolves are saying no.
Yeah.
And the party fights alongside the Red Wolves, does a very cool combat siege at a river where the orcs try to cross the river at an
Yeah.
ideal crossing
We had to
place
find
called the
fight
Steps of the
hundreds of
Storm.
orcs.
You didn't. You fought dozens of orcs.
It felt like
Uh,
hundreds.
it felt like hundreds. And alongside with Brunek, you defeated them.
Yeah.
There was a very they were riding big bugs mainly. The gimmick of these orcs was they were animal herders,
Yeah.
and they were really good at animal husbandry, and they were employing these big bugs that could dig
Yeah.
and had fire breaths. And there was one of them was really huge and was carrying basically a bridge on its back to cross the river.
But
Uh,
one important note also about this arc is it's the first time we leave the Elysium, and when we
True.
do, Kohai,
Oh,
who has a little bit of wild magic sorcerer in him, casts a fireball spontaneously. He has this huge wild surge of magic as he leaves the Elysium. And we also
yeah.
had a shield that we had found that seemed by all rights it ought to be magical, but its magical abilities only activated once we left the Elysium. Both of these obviously giving the hint that something about magic outside of the Elysium is wilder and more chaotic, and something about magic within the Elysium is more muted and toned down.
Yes. That is exactly that is exactly what happened. And I think
Which
at
is
this
also the
point,
general experience. We fought like big monsters. There was a lot more crazy stuff.
yeah,
There was just, I remember one night you just narrated how this gigantic, long legged wolf like creature just walked through the forest by us. And it was
yeah.
just like, okay, don't look at it, don't touch it. Just monsters on the scale that inside the Elysium you don't really see, are not really possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And partially that's the experience because in the history of the Elysium, it was cleaned up by the Mecha and her forces with the blessing of the matrons, and then the walls, and then everyone's defending it, so the monsters are not supposed to get in. But
Yeah.
also, it gets really
I mean,
weird
cleaned
out
up,
here.
it was conquered.
Yeah, conquered. It was very much conquered. And yeah, to cut it short, the party walked up this colossal mountain called the Titan's Nest, which is a mountain that is like roughly twice as big as every the mountains around it, and
Yeah.
is growing weird spines on it, weird stony spines.
Yeah.
They meet an orc there who is kind of like a reject of the Cosmos clan, who's trying to reconquer his honor by
Yeah.
slaying the monsters that were feeding off the Cosmos food supply. You cut a deal. You helped him defeat the monster and bring its
Well,
head
and
back to the
this
village.
is also the point where we identify why this tribe is even trying to invade the Elysium.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, there's monsters that are destroying their food supply and chasing them here. They're not here because they're savage, mean orcs. They're
yeah,
here because they're effectively refugees of a environmental collapse.
exactly. So you fought these kind of Arctic peritons who were
Yeah.
preying on their food. You killed them, and then he, in exchange for this help, guided you to the temple, where you fought some undead orcs that were guarding it
Yeah.
through psionic necromancy, which was something a little bit weird, but it checked out with like the body modification type psionics that I read about in the Unearthed Arcana. I was
Yeah,
like, oh,
these
they
were
changed their
inspired by
bodies.
the these were inspired by the Unearthed Arcana mystic, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And basically they went to the bottom of the temple. They found the mushroom, which had completely overgrown underground and seemed to have entered some sort of like symbiotic relationship with a nest of giant ants. But the situation was solved peacefully through trade with the ants, and
Yeah.
the party could return with the mushroom and with this orc who now
And we were
essentially
warned. The
brought
party was
peace.
warned
Oh, yeah.
by the ants, by the mushroom ants. They told us a magic is powerful, and that the three are coming. And we weren't really sure exactly what that meant. But Idarian's whole character thing was that the more that he studied this book, the more he learned about these Eldrazi Titans, which are basically, lifted straight from Magic the Gathering lore.
Yes,
Um,
shamefully. I mean, we're
Shamefully,
not.
yeah.
I'm not really hiding behind any of my inspirations. The setting is very inspired by Attack on Titan. If you haven't noticed already, and for the Eldrazi, we just took the Eldrazi.
Yeah. And so we were like, oh, these Eldrazi Titans, they're coming, So
Yeah,
they're like these extra dimensional, like Cthulhu-esque beings, except for, I mean, if you've listened to some of our stuff, you've heard us talk about them before. Uh, they're kind of Cthulhu-like, except for they're actually pretty easy to understand because
they're
they just want to
hungry.
eat your reality whole and convert it into more of themselves.
Yeah,
So they're kind of just cosmic parasites. So yeah,
yeah,
so a couple of big warnings, a couple of big hints also that the magic inside the Elysium was not the limit of magic, that there was more there. which, being as ambitious as he is kind of Idarian had always suspected that there might be artificial limits to some degree to magic, because I remember early on in the setting, I also found a tablet that was kind of like a periodic table of elements that showed spells with like ninth level spell slots, but then they were carved off the tablet.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was a pretty heavy implication, or a pretty heavy clue, that like there used to be more than third level spells in the Elysium, but there aren't anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with all this knowledge and these hints, you returned as heroes. You the orc with like by slaying the monsters. With their the orc became kind of like a new popular hero of these orcs, and with
Yeah,
a
the
little bit of
outcast
pop.
became the prodigal son.
Yeah, exactly, and with a little bit of politicking, essentially the Red Wolves managed to agree on a peace where the orcs would essentially stay for the winter with the Red Wolves
Yeah,
and help them essentially establish a base outside of the Elysium, because the Red Wolves are always trying to build an encampment outside of the Elysium that is permanent, but they tend to get wiped out a lot. But with the
yeah,
help of these orcs, they manage to build one to survive the winter, and in exchange, the orcs get fed, and
yeah,
then they can decide basically whether they want to return to their lands or they want to stay. Um, the party returns with the mushroom, goes to Makba and Meika, inside of the Elysium, in a small town, in a cellar. A secret, basically mind melding session is held with the
yeah.
party, Makba and Meika, and you entered the Meika's mind. And what
And
did we
this was
find in
really,
there?
yeah, this was a really cool sequence because it wasn't a flashback and it wasn't just narration. We were inside her memories and could walk around and ask people questions and interact with NPCs, and then shift from location to location as we moved through the phases of her life. And essentially, what we learn is, oh boy, did we learn the full plot at that point? We did, right?
You didn't learn about the mind parasites yet.
Okay.
What you learned is that you learned that you saw the construction of the eye, like you
Yeah.
saw the eye of the beholder
Yeah, so
floating in a
basically, yeah, we
tank.
see them fight a beholder, and I don't know if you don't know, a beholder's eye emits an anti magic field, and we see this eye be harvested and transformed into the Eye of Elysium, which is this half a being, half a device that basically creates a selective anti magic field over the entire Elysium. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so that's why magic is suppressed, and we see the original matrons, but we see them like as people, and we see that they're very ambitious and that they want to be deified, and that Meika is against this, and that they brainwash her, she is betrayed, the Elysium is founded, and they take over, not as kings and not really as gods, but as both the gods and the kings. um,
Yeah,
so
and there's
basically, it's
also,
revealed that it's all a conspiracy and that the monarchy hasn't been the monarchy for the last 300 years. The monarchy is just a puppet council ruled by these five matrons, by
I
these
mean, it's
five
the same,
gods.
right? Because one of these five is also the monarch.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure we knew that at the time, but yeah.
sure.
Uh,
One important thing is that right before they basically brainwashed Meika and deleted all her memories, like there's this memory of Meika kneeling down, being kneeled in chains in front of them. One of them steps up to them and kind of like whispers to her, "Don't lose your faith, Fliam."
yeah, so speaking directly to one of our characters.
Yeah, like in a
Um,
memory of 300 years ago.
yeah,
And then one of the matrons just goes like, "Who's Fliam?"
yeah. So, after this, the psionic guy tries to betray us, which ends very poorly for him, and with a whole bunch of torture, and he ends up killing himself in a
But let's
cell
not talk
because we,
about that.
yeah, we keep coming every day to like we keep casting suggestion on him until he fails, and then forcing him to tell us everything he knows.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, to be clear,
so
the reason he betrayed them was essentially because he was tired of living as a servant to Meika at the edge of the world,
yeah,
and especially he wanted to like break in and like live inside the Elysium with his adopted daughter. So he
yeah,
tries to, which by the way, she was present at the session too, the daughter, but she was just like asleep in a box. that
Yeah.
the Red Wolf had brought as
She was
leverage.
definitely a measure of control. Like, this is how
Yeah,
Mecha controlled him in a big way. Was
yeah.
like, if you don't do what I say, I'm gonna hurt your daughter. So he's kind of an interesting character because he gets an end that no human really deserves. But also, this is what he spent his whole life doing. So on some level, he's so slimy that it feels like just desserts because his whole career was breaking minds and
It has a
manipulating people,
certain like
reading.
level of karma to it. Like you can disagree
Yeah.
with it ethically, but you can say like narratively, it's like this ironic, like narrative irony end to
But
him.
yeah, Idarian as the person casting suggestion on him all day was
Feels good.
definitely like one of his darker moments where he was enraged that, he would be betrayed. How dare you do this to me and mine? Which, he saw the party as as part of him, and Meka also to a degree of part of him. So it's like, how dare you betray us like this? And this indignant rage that he uses to justify the actions that he does to Makba that are obviously pretty horrific, and one of his darkest moments as a character, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Any,
yeah,
Anyways, from this point onward, things start to kind of heat up a little bit. The next arc is a big city intrigue, which is kind of, in the end, not really important to anything.
I think it's a
We
nice interim in hindsight. It's like it's a nice middle of the story moment
Yeah.
of downtime activity.
So we kind of do these shenanigans. We get involved with the revolution.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
find
wait,
that there
wait,
are
wait. The revolution. This is where the revolution starts. So before you guys
yeah
leave, you spend a little bit of time at the monastery. Apart from torturing Makba, other things are happening, right?
yeah
Meika is starting to make big moves.
yeah
She starts riding around because she's been around for 400 years. She has the allegiance of a lot of red wolves, and
yeah
she starts writing letters. Idarion starts dropping pamphlets with his familiar in around the Elysium
yeah.
without
Getting that info out.
getting that info out. Like Mecha starts raising her forces, and also at this point, Fliam kind of has been visited for a while in his dreams by the matrons, which at this point we know are not what they seem like.
Yeah,
But like
more people than gods.
before we had 100% confidence about this, he gave up in one of his dreams. He basically told that they were about to go into Meika's mind and uncover a bunch of secret memories. Derek
Yeah,
just straight up told it to one of the matrons.
which is like,
Uh
would you not trust God?
yeah, but like at this point you guys were already pretty suspicious, right? You already knew that the matrons there was something weird with the matrons
But
going on.
Fliam was by far the most faithful of all of us.
Yeah,
Like, he really,
absolutely. That's why he
that
was getting
character.
the dreams. That was he was
Yeah,
getting the
that's why
dream.
he really believed in the situation. So I feel like it's very fair that he had
Yeah,
enough cognitive dissonance to still
yeah,
trust God, even if you're getting these inclinations that God may just be a person, just a person with psychic powers and political inclinations.
yeah. And yeah, so Fliam kind of gave up this information, which is important because at this point, this is when all bells start ringing in the heads of the matrons as well.
Yeah. And that's why he's also gets specifically addressed in the vision to not lose his faith, even though he's just been given a boatload of
Mhm.
information that should challenge his faith.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so in the next interim, we sort of swap out some of the political leadership in one of the local capitals of Zedek. That doesn't really ever end up mattering.
But
But
well, it matters because what you're doing is you're bonding with the faction of the Harpers.
yeah, so we get in with the Harpers, who are sort of this kind of a revolutionary subset of the Red Wolves who operate in private and in secret and think the walls need to come down and we need to get rid of the matrons and we need to, I mean, there's a lot of different thoughts, but they're very
Yeah.
anti-establishment and they want to kind of bust open the system.
Yeah, they
And we
basically
start to,
split off from the Red Wolves because the Red Wolves are a military group that essentially is like, we need to keep pushing out and eventually we'll make it. And there were the Harpers like, you fools. First, you need to enact change from the inside. And then,
yeah.
because like, as long as the monarchy doesn't support and fund you, you will not get nowhere.
At the
So,
same time, Idarian gets chased down by his past, so we get to meet the entire shadowy cabal, and it turns out that they're from Devil Country. and they're kind of these CIA spies who have been sent in to try and destroy the Eye of Elysium to make the Elysium vulnerable to attack. You see, that time that a giant devil flew into Gadamer and his flight stopped working and he crashed into the ground? Uh, that wasn't a coincidence. That is related to this. That was the first incursion, and these are the second incursors.
Yeah.
And they're here to destabilize the Elysium from the inside. That elf who was running that like culty anti-research ring is trying to drum up paramilitary support for their cause. And there's a whole bunch of different people in this cabal, but they're all from outside, and they confront Idarian and they say basically, destroy the Eye of Elysium, or we're going to tell everybody about your past and that you murdered this person in this library.
Yeah,
And
basically, there was an investigator who had been tasked by people who were not convinced about Idarian's story to investigate
yeah,
further, and this guy had almost got it. And then the incursors were like, "Oh, interesting." They had intercepted him, gotten the whole story, and then killed it for Idarian in front of Idarian's eyes. And we are
yeah.
like, "Well, now, now
Now
we
you
own your
owe
ass."
us. Yeah. And Idarian, two things had happened. Idarian had also tried to summon some aberrant beast out when we were out on the borders outside of the Elysium, because he thought, oh, this is a good chance to play with magic higher than my level. And it went horribly wrong. But the rest of the party still kind of forgave him and embraced him and said, hey, if you're going to do something crazy dangerous like that, at least tell us what is going on. Let us in on it. We don't hate and condemn you for your weaknesses or for your ambition. We just want you to do it safely. So an Idarian comes to them again and goes, here's this dark moment of my past. I'm being blackmailed with it. They again were like, well, we're happy to work together to try and preserve your reputation and preserve you from the consequences of your past, which is, to be honest, kind on some level, but very enabling on another. And so this really sort of cemented Idarian's bond with the group and gave him this feeling that, like, oh, these people really care about me for who I am, and I'm willing to fight for them and die for them because they're willing to go out of their way to keep me safe and keep me safe from these other incursors. And so basically we end up hatching the plan, and this is really where we start to get into the third arc. We hatch the plan of, yes, we're going to destroy the Eye of Elysium, and then we're also going to kill the incursors, and then we're going to reform the Elysian state as a republic, and then we're going to fight off the devil invasion. And as implausible as that chain of events seems, that's pretty much the plan for the rest of the campaign. This is really sort of when the campaign condenses down into a list of objectives that we start to work through one by one.
Yeah. So here's also where you pick up a new party member.
Yes.
A
Harper,
O'Sheen, a bard,
played by Copernicus.
Played by Copernicus, who is like a member of the Harpers, but has a lot of his own ideas. He is also he's also a noble, like he's also of noble origin from the city, from the capital, and he has a little bit of an obsession because he is the only one who really believes the story of his grandfather, who was a Kazaran man, who was living by the coastside, and who allegedly, when in the age of magic, were before things got so unbearable that the Kazaran had to migrate, went on like sea expeditions over and under the water with like a makeshift kind of like
Submersible.
like submersive device, like the Big Bell type device, and where he met allegedly some kind of dragon-like creature underwater, who warned him of an extremely, like, almost infinite source of magical power, to be afraid of, allegedly in the sea, according to the grandfather. And so Sheen was kind of was really trying to fight with the Harpers to change things so that eventually the Red Wolves would get their funding, and that the Elysium would try to expand its borders, hopefully one day to reach the sea again and to find this alleged power source in the water, and everyone thinks he's crazy, but he is pretty good at what he does. He's a bard, and so he is a member of the member of the Harpers. But the Harpers are very happy to tell him to go with the party and go destroy the Eye as their
And that's the other
representative
thing. At
in the
this
party.
point, whenever we meet people who are shady, they always ask us what our deal is, and we kind of get into the 6-minute spiel of explaining, well, the history of the Elysium is not what you think, the gods are fake, and there's an eye that's blocking us from making progress, and we could be so much more if only we had different government and we got rid of the Eye of the Elysium. And a lot
Yeah,
of the Harpers don't believe this spiel, but they're still happy to have to send us off to have us destroy the Eye of Elysium. So we go.
yeah,
Um,
and also the Harper leader is this old dwarf who's been side by side with Mecha for a long time before the Harpers split off. So,
yeah,
with a little bit of sanding stone communication with Meika, who kind of vouches for the party,
yeah,
it's like, all right,
yeah.
these
So we
guys
go
are
off
legit.
and we find Doifusheim. Um, so one of them is called Helheim, the other's called Doifusheim. um, uh, and it's again this underground city, and it's right outside the capital. The
Yeah,
capital is at
much
the center
bigger
of
than
the Elysium.
Helheim.
Yeah, the capital's at the center of the Elysium and has sort of a shield wall around it. As well, so there's kind of two layers of gigantic walls, to get from outside the Elysium to the capital. But under these walls, yeah, there's this gigantic underground ruin, and we fight our way. We sneak into it, and then fight our way through it, and destroy all these, ancient monsters and elementals. Da 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 da. But it's not that hard, to be honest. And then we get to the eye, and the eye we fight, and it's like a beholder mini boss, and it's quite exciting, and we fight it and da da da. And we destroy it, and while we're down there we learn a whole bunch of information about the matrons.
Yeah,
We
the
learn
main
about their
conduit
or-
through this. You want to go into the details of it, like how you learn all this information. Your hidden memory.
uh I don't even remember. Sure, go for
Okay, well,
it.
okay. So essentially, when they destroy the eye, I mean, a couple of things happen. The first one is wild magic surges into the Elysium as if a dam was just destroyed,
Yeah,
and fucks it up, especially the capital, because the capital is like at the epicenter of the gradient.
kind of the
Um,
exact same thing that happened to Kohai when he left the Elysium
yeah,
is what
basically
happens to
that,
the
but
whole
like it happens
Elysium.
to an entire country.
Yeah.
The party levels up because of the
Yep.
magic flood. And on a the memories thing. So basically, I mean, you guys already found a lot of clues into the city to piece
Yeah.
together more information. But what you learn is that Maker's not the only one with like hidden, buried memories.
Yeah.
The party has some too, because on the way from Mecca, from the monastery of Mecca to the city where they did all the intrigue and the cat and mouse game with Yara, they met an individual who was one of the five matrons
Yeah.
and is the one who also whispered to Phlium to not lose his faith.
Yeah. The
And he
same
is the
guy.
gazer, or the all eye in the older
Title.
nomenclature. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he seems to have some sort of like foresight abilities. And he had told them essentially the entire deal of the matrons, which
Yeah.
is the matrons are essentially the side product of mind flayer experimentation. The Mirians on their migration were actually captured and enslaved for 20 years by mind flayers or proto mind flayers who had just been born due to the advent of magic and were still experimenting with their own biology and like figuring out the best way to be mind flayers. And they had
Yeah.
created these alternative to the classic traditional tadpole, which is this kind of worm, which turned out to be an extremely powerful like parasite, but also not a parasite at all, but a symbiote.
Yeah.
So these experimental worms had turned out to be incredibly powerful and to enter a symbiotic relationship with their host, not a parasitic one, which meant that the users still retained their free will to wield the power however they wanted, and these Emirian subjects and slaves essentially turned into the first five matrons, these incredibly powerful psychic warriors who could stand toe to toe with an entire mind flayer armada and destroyed them. And
Yeah.
here they also met a man named Ezra, a, a man who was
A
instead and essentially was had also been captured, but he was here not because he had tried to infiltrate the Mind Flayer colony, because he was after an artifact that they had, a, an amulet that is now in the hands of Idarian. So he is the
yeah.
author of the journal. He is the first
He's
wielder
the
of the
author of
amulet.
Idarian's magic book, and the amulet that you can pull out of the cover of the book. Well, that was his too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the five matrons essentially, or these five warriors, had then led the people of the Elysium, the Mirians to the Elysium, met the Kazaran, fought the war, created the walls with their with incredibly powerful abilities. Each one of them kind of specializes in a field of psionics. So one of them, the Dominator, is all about controlling people. The Blind Eye is about memory manipulation. The All Eye has this
Builder.
foresight ability. The Builder is
Yeah.
telekineticist.
The All Eye has this ability where he shares all experiences of all his descendants at once.
Yeah,
So basically, these worms pass from host to host to host to host over history, over hundreds of years. And so he's experiencing all of their presence at once as though it was one moment, which is why he can sort of give this time travel advice in a sense. And yeah, the builder is telekinetic.
yeah. And essentially, they wanted to, the worms, let them breed, make more, spread the worms so that everyone would get one, and eventually create like essentially a nation of psychic super soldiers. But the things turned out very poorly, because it turns out that these parasites, that like um, these worms kind of are like biological parasites, in the sense that the body does not recognize them as a part of their own. The five that were implanted work well and aren't recognized by the biologically by their hosts.
Yeah,
But
it was
when they
kind of like
try
a
to
Jekyll and Hyde thing where it's like, oh, as it turns out, these worms don't just work. It was a coincidence or fortunate for the
or they
five
were
matrons
actually they
that
were
these
made for
worked.
it. I mean, they were
Yeah,
made for them. Like the mind flayers made them for
yeah,
these subjects. But when they inject them into somebody else, like the body has like an immune reaction. Like the first person was injected with it almost died immediately. It
yeah.
was it was a horror show. So what they realized is basically only the lineage of the five matrons, only biologically, the lineage of the five matrons can inherit them, because the parasite moves from host to host and kind of adapts to the biology. So every time they jump, there's a little bit of adaptation going on, but they're still similar enough that the worm can adapt from host to host, but they cannot just share it. So what you have now is not that everyone can get one, but only people from their descendants can get them, and that puts them at a difficult situation because
Well, because they think either we're going to be bred as stock so that people can produce psychic warriors from us, um, and that scares them very much, that idea. And so they think, okay, so the only other alternative is for us to destroy any of the additional worms that we've made, take the worms we currently have, make them infertile, because the life giver is all about like manipulating the body and life and can like mutate people and do changes like this.
and
And so
extend
then there
life.
will only ever be five worms, and they can only be passed from us, and we're going to keep the rest of the population under control forever. And we'll never relinquish power, and nothing will
Yeah,
ever go
and
wrong.
the system will never go wrong because the life giver can extend the lifespan of the worms, and it's fine. And the Eye of Elysium, I mean, at first it's a defensive measure, because like the first devil that crossed by, the Gadamor devil, crashed
Yeah,
into Gadamor because it was dying slowly and painfully. And the
yeah.
same goes for every like very magical monster. But then second, also just because they were all really afraid of, like, yeah, the psionic powers were super cool and powerful at first, but now Ezra is coming up with all these cool spells, and like the magical the arcanists are really getting good at magic, and they're really mastering it, and soon they will be more powerful than us, and then it will be very easy for them to take us down. So they were losing their edge, and so the Eye of Elysium flattens No, not flattens the battlefield. It's the opposite. Really,
Yeah.
really makes the battlefield unequal
It
between
pitches
them.
the battlefield in their favor by making
Exactly.
it so that only psionics works in this country and otherwise only low-level magic.
Exactly.
And so they try to establish and keep that system going for 320 years. And over time, the worms get older and older and older and more decrepit. And eventually, the memory blocks they put in people's heads so that nobody would ever walk into these ancient ruins, for example, in Helheim, start to fade and things start to slip through the cracks. And certain revolutionaries who go to the border go there untracked. And certain memories that are unlocked in Mecha are not re-brainwashed.
Yeah,
And
so
so we
more and
we
more
basically, as the
things slip
party,
to the
we
crack.
represent the cracks that are opening up in the foundations of their system, which is based fully on just power and mind control.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So,
And
and then we destroyed the eye, and
we
that was
destroyed, yeah.
also a gigantic crack in the foundation of the matron's rule. We destroyed the eye. We found some magical chronomancy potions from Ezra that give you a long rest on demand. We go back up to meet up with the incursors and be like, hey, job well done, we did it. And instead, we killed them and blew them up and finally got our revenge on them for killing all the people in the caravan and killing all the orcs and being mean to us.
Yeah, these guys also
Um,
turn into devils, like polymorph into devils, so it's a whole epic fight for them not to
yeah.
break through. Which is kind of silly in hindsight, in the sense like if they had gotten through, it might have turned out better for you in the end.
Mm,
But because their objective was first destroy the eye, and second, destabilize the government completely by killing the 5 matrons, or at
yeah.
least like kill a bunch of military officials.
Yeah.
In the
But
meantime,
we
Meika
defeated them
arrives.
in a
Yeah,
in an over 10 round fight. It was very long. It was very epic. We had
it
to
was a siege.
we had to cast bless multiple times and stuff like that. Like we had to re-up spells because they ran out. Yeah, and we fought hundreds of enemies, hundreds of these people who'd been brainwashed. This anti-research, anti-magic, pro-devil cult had really grown at this point, and we fought a whole bunch of them too, along with the incursors, and we managed to defeat them all. And Mecha shows up with the cavalry, with the reinforcements, and
Yeah,
the
basically she
revolution is
had
on.
brought. Yeah, basically she had brought like the small contingent ahead because they were being tracked, of course, by the matrons
Yeah,
through spies. But she managed to bring us to sneak a small contingent ahead, a week ahead.
yeah,
So you take control of the revolution takes control of this wall. The wall keepers that are occupying it fall back because they're ordered to fall back because the matrons is like, no, 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 come over in the city and defend us now.
yeah,
Because the city is all fucked up by the wild magic. There's monsters everywhere.
yeah. And the way the mild magic works is it's generating elementals out of air, it's animating houses, it's animating, statues and chairs and other inanimate
Yeah,
objects.
it's turning people into sorcerers and fucking them up. Like I
It's
haven't
it's
talked about it, but
mutating
like
animals and stuff like that.
yeah, like we haven't talked about it, but like after this second round of wild magic, like a lot of there's new lineages in the Elysium now. Like I haven't talked
Yeah.
about it, but like now there's like you're gonna have a lot more tieflings. You're gonna get like more Fey lineages. You're gonna get Eladrin elves born from elves.
Yeah,
You're
because it
going
was
to
all pretty low magic. Like there was like elves, dwarves, humans.
yeah
That was pretty much it in terms of playable
halflings.
lineages.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
don't
And I
remember ever meeting a halfling,
the
to be
Yoshiba
honest.
girl is a halfling.
She's a halfling?
Yeah, they're halflings.
Oh, that's cute.
Oh yeah, by the way, Idarion funded the start of artificing in the first phase of the
Yeah, he
campaign,
found a
which
young
really paid off
promising
later.
girl.
Yeah,
Yeah, he found a young promising girl in Zedek who was really good at artificing, and he spent a whole bunch of gold to pay for her education because he believed she should have the opportunities he didn't in life.
yeah,
Not that he didn't have the financial opportunities, but he just didn't have the spark. And
yeah.
anyways,
So
he saw similarities.
yeah,
So and then the revolution is on, baby, right? Mecha is here, the Red Wolves are here, the Eye is destroyed, wild magic is ravaging the countryside, the matrons clearly don't have a handle on the situation anymore, the incursors and the representation of these devil people are dead, and this is where we took our hiatus.
that's where we took our hiatus. And
We said
then
goodbye to Fliam's character.
yeah,
This
and
was
then to
sort of the
Kohai's.
and to Kohai's character. This was sort of the point where we don't have a space name for him yet, but Proteus and the guy who played Fleam, each fairly closely to each other, decided this type of game is the lore is a little too much, and I can't keep track of it, and I can't devote the time to it that I want to, and I'm not having fun. Especially Proteus didn't enjoy the combat, and it was
Yeah,
getting like more and more combat heavy. So, so they both left, which I think was the right thing to do. The only thing I wish had gone differently is that maybe they could have told us earlier, and we could have maybe adjusted the game. I also
yeah,
think Proteus stuck around a bit longer than it was fun for him, and he should
yeah,
have maybe left a little earlier. But I think it was really good that then in the end that they voiced their feelings to us and that they um, left.
yeah.
And so we took a long hiatus, and after the hiatus, we came back with me, with Copernicus, and with also missing a space name, but her character's name is Picona.
Picona, yeah, Picona is essentially a wood carver from family, like this the daughter of like wood carvers
Yeah,
who was really tried to get into magic and learning magic, kind of like a Darian. But she really was missing the spark. She's a very practical person. She's not really a theoretical person. But then, as artificing becomes very popular because of Idarian's funding, suddenly they're holding like first rounds of like artificing courses, and like they're testing candidates, and she shows up to one of these testing candidates, and she's really good at it, and like she's into it, and this test is going really well. She's carving this like mechanical doll device out of wood, and it's working really well, and like her career is right here. She's excited. And then the eye gets destroyed in a wild magic storm, wipes down, like wipes wipes the entire class off the face of the earth in various ways, and she basically melts with her doll and becomes this living sentient wooden puppet, not a Groot, not a living tree, but like a mechanical wooden mechanism,
yeah.
sentient, capable of like changing her shape. And like mechanically, we kind of made her a druid, but like
Yeah,
she
she was
wasn't it.
playing a moon druid, so she could turn into, giant wooden serpents, giant wooden bears, giant wooden spiders, all kinds of fun.
Yeah,
A very very cool sort of character concept and character physiology.
yeah, we adapted her abilities because, like we said, okay, if you're not turning into an animal, like a real animal, but always a wooden one, you will never be able to disguise yourself, which is a big like debuff to the druid's wild shape. So instead, I will give you the ability to also turn into furnitures and like
Yeah.
wooden stuff. So yeah, you
We
may not turn
we
into
had a
an animal.
ladder. She turned into a ladder, and that was very handy once.
She can also turn like into, I don't know, like a table and
Yeah,
disguise herself as a table in a room if she needs to listen in on a conversation. So
yeah.
there is still stealth in there, but it's not as an animal, it's as like wooden stuff. But yeah, Picona is initially
And so
just like
this was the
la-
last third of the campaign.
yeah, the last year.
And we had Oshin, we had Picona, and we had Idarian, and we were in the capital, and the revolution was on like Donkey Kong. Um,
Yeah.
it was really going down,
Yeah, you
and
guys were acting as ambassadors of the revolution, essentially, trying to convince to flip sides, flip factions to your side.
yeah. So those 5 factions, the Red Wolves, obviously already flipped. The Wall Keepers, the Lodge of Good Trade, the Order of the Spark, and the Shepherds of Purity. We had these 4 factions left, and the idea was pretty clear. It was you got to flip, at least 2 or 3 of these factions to your side, and then you're going to storm the Matron's Mercy, which is sort of the most fortified palatial building in the center of the most fortified city, in the center of the most fortified nation on the earth, right?
Mhm,
So it's like, we've broken into the capital, we've gotten past the wall of the capital during the course of the Incursor fight, and now
mhm,
we're in the capital, and the only last bastion is the Matron's Mercy.
mhm,
Um, and not to get overly into detail, we do a bunch of side quests for various groups and flip one faction after another. There's a side quest where there's an alchemical brewing house that sort of becomes sentient and alive and wants a life. outside of the Elysium, and we managed to transfer its consciousness into like a basketball. I can't remember.
No,
We
no,
trans
you basically manage to like transmute it by using a bunch of human souls to power the
yeah,
spell. You transmute it into like a humanoid-sized like
yeah,
machine that is like still weighs like 3 tons.
yeah.
But yeah, so whenever she walks around, like
So we could smuggle her out of the we
Elysium.
could smuggle Clockwork out of the city, and they could have a life of their own. We fought a
Yeah,
whole bunch of wall keepers. Wall keepers kind of became the generic enemy cops in this section of the story, and obviously we were rebels and revolutionaries. Idarian showed himself as particularly merciless and like cold-hearted when facing them. He generally killed with prejudice. Um,
yeah,
because he was like, if I fight him once, I don't want to have to fight him again, and I don't want them carrying information back. So he definitely, I mean, it's not really, I mean, we're all revolutionaries and traitors at this point. I don't know how the rules of law and the laws of warfare really apply in this universe, but there was definitely one point where there was like a guard post, and they were like, "Hey, who are you? You can't go through here." And Idarian just blew them up with a fucking force fireball, basically, which is it's a spell from Explorer's Guide to Exandria or whatever, or Explorer's Guide to Wildmount.
wide mount.
But he used that Chronal Force spell and like destroyed them all. And that was a moment where they just met Picona, and she was like, "So, what are you guys? You guys aren't violent, are you?" And he was like, "Boom!" and killed these 3 guards, and was like, "Yeah, this is what it's going to be like from here
You
on out.
betcha. Kills a
Yeah,
bunch of cops.
exactly. Like, yeah, we're violent revolutionaries. We're here to topple the government. We're here to destroy the system with violence and forge it anew as a better system."
Yeah. Are you in
Um,
or not?
exactly. And very much like we are justified. They're manipulators. They're mind controllers. You can never live with them on a peer level, and you can never live in respect with them because they can never respect you because they can always mind control you at a whim.
Yeah.
There's no negotiating with a mind flayer who inherently sees you as an inferior being that exists to be controlled by them.
Yeah.
But
So
that did mean a
notable
lot of
things that happen. Yeah, sorry.
but that did involve a lot of violence and killing, and
Yeah.
even just the wild surges that we keep harping on about that were happening all the time. Those were hurting and killing a lot of people, notably Picona, but also others.
Yeah, like a lot of
So
innocent civilians got killed because of the destruction of the eye.
I just kind of point this out because for me, this was a big culmination of this sort of great, ambitious person of history arc that Idarian had, where he's got all this ego and all this ambition. But I, as Ceres, want to point out, we were very aware of just all the lives it was costing to satisfy his vision and his ambition.
Yeah, like not like we were not out of game or not like this is good. This is all
Yeah,
good.
we're not like Idarian is not the good guy of the story.
And speaking of, so a notable thing that happened is that Idarian actually managed, like, led the party to Ezra's laboratory, like this underground bunker that Ezra has in the city, that was kind
Yeah,
of connecting Teufelsheim with the capital, kind of in the middle, and in the
yeah,
middle space. And to figure out more stuff about Ezra, and there you found essentially a crack in reality
yeah, a
between the
portal.
material world and the blind, not the blind, yeah, the blind eternities, this like higher dimensional space
Yeah, this kind
where
of
the
astral plane,
Eldrazi.
basically.
Yeah, and can you briefly, and I mean briefly, like we're running out of time, briefly, description of like what's the deal here and what you did?
Yeah, so basically, this is where I learned about what the impact of magic, and it's all very abstract, but it seems like a 5-dimensional robot collided with a 5-dimensional Cthulhu squid, um, and they were fighting, and then they impacted, or the 5-dimensional Cthulhu squid ejected 3 eggs of its variety out into the world, and then impacted with our world, and that's what brought magic to our world. And so each of these Titan eggs were important in a big way as sources of magic. And the one Titan whose amulet I had was not all 3 of the Eldrazi, just one of them was Ulamog. And Ezra had basically put the book away in, Podunk U, because he was like, this is way too dangerous for anyone to handle. And this guy eats souls and organic matter. And this is just bad news. Like, nobody should be making deals with Ulamog. He's dangerous, which
Yeah,
meant that
and
the
Ezra was
other
also
two,
one of the architects of the Eye.
yeah. And because Ezra wanted everything to go back to before magic, which was one of the things Idarian harped on. He was like, you guys chose for us that no magic was better, but I choose for us that yes, magic is better. Um, But yeah, so Ezra was like, Ulamog is too dangerous, nobody should be making deals with him. Which means the other two Eldrazi Titans had about 300 years head start of cultists and people worshipping them and giving them their soul and stuff like that for them to hatch out of their egg. Whereas Ulamog, although very much conscious as like an abstract presence, he was very much unhatched. And so Idarian was like, I could forget your amulet forever and never give it to anybody. So I have leverage over you, and you have power that you can grant me. So you have leverage over me. So give me the power I need to succeed in my revolutionary cause. And the moment the last of the matrons are dead, you can have anything you want from me. You can have my life, my soul, my body, my appearance. You can have it all.
Yeah,
So
and
like this
Ulamog took all
ultimate
of those.
yeah, an ultimate warlock pact, and Idarian didn't regret it at all. That was one of the things I didn't want to do tragic pact. I wanted to do what's tragic is that you didn't ever realize that you didn't need to satisfy this ambition to be a good and worthwhile person, right? To
Yeah,
me, the tragedy of Idarian is you didn't need to do all of this for Dad to love you.
yeah,
Other people could have loved you for other reasons,
yeah,
and you didn't have to satisfy this ambition. You didn't have to be a great man of history. But if
yeah.
your goal was to become a great man of history, this deal was a great deal. It was a fantastic deal. He chose it with both eyes open. He quite liked it. He negotiated it himself. It was a great deal.
Yeah,
So he negotiated for himself the power to take on the matrons, and for the people of the Elysium,
and
the
the power
power
to choose for the rest of the Elysium. Notably, I
y-
would like to point out,
yeah, well, he
like,
chose for the he chose for the rest of the Elysium also like a safety blanket from other Eldrazi Titans.
yeah,
So everyone in the Elysium is now somewhat resistant to Eldrazi Titan magic. They all have this little tattoo mark at the base of their neck that's sort of the symbol of Ulamog, and it shields them from Eldrazi magic and allows them to choose their path, to be themselves, to fight when eventually all these Eldrazi wake up to fight for themselves.
yeah. So now, kind of speedrunning it, you went into the Matron's Mercy with all this power and all these factions and all this help. You besieged it. You managed to break in. The Matron's Mercy essentially started collapsing into the ground as a safety
Yeah,
mechanism and returning to Doyfield's. You found out that the matrons who were offering shelter to a lot of civilians during the Civil War had basically put all these people to sleep in a big tank to kind of mind control them, rewipe their memories, and start anew. They even,
yeah.
as the matron,
They were
as the
going to wipe
mercy,
the Elysium clean using wild magic surges and then restart the whole process and try again.
yeah, they literally had this floating crystal that was like a giant wild magic crystal that was like pulsating every few minutes, a wild magic surge.
Yeah,
And like would eventually, essentially, like, yeah, basically, like, it's the equivalent of sterilization by radioactivity.
yeah.
You turn on the UV light and slowly the UV light kill everything because of radioactivity. It's that.
So, yeah, so in a sequence of epic fights, we kill one matron after another, except for the All
All
Eye, the
I.
guy who he knows this is the last life that he lives, the last iteration of him, and
He
he
accepts it.
knows that the system could never work forever. And could never hold out forever. So he just goes willingly. He drinks a bunch of poison. Like, he meets us, he talks to us. Idarian gets to have Idarian has a whole complicated relationship to his sister who he cares about very much. And she's the only person really who says to him, but why couldn't you live for us instead of sacrificing yourself for your ambition?
Yeah.
And
And he
so
has this
they have
conversation across time because, like, he's talking
yeah.
to her about like 2 weeks ago or so.
Yeah, he's talking to her 2 weeks ago when the All Eye went to talk to her. So he gets to have this last moment with his sister, and then the All Eye drinks a bunch of poison, and we go in and we kill one of the matrons instantly with the bag of holding trick. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you put two bag of holdings in each other, they basically create a bomb. that just instantly destroys something and sends it to the astral plane, which is Ulamog's plane. So we sent one of them to Ulamog, and then we killed the other one.
Yeah.
It was a very tough fight, but we got there in the end.
Yeah.
Idarian dies, and gets consumed, and Ulamog kind of like body snatchers him. So Idarian's still around, but it's not him. He's not voiced by me anymore. He's no longer my character.
Yeah.
Thea is voicing him and playing him.
And the players immediately kill him.
They immediately kill him because they fully distrust him. I mean, Idarian also gave them a lot of hints that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
should distrust him as soon as the matrons are dead.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so then they killed him instantly, but he like alien regenerated over a few days.
Yeah. In the meantime, Kohai and Fleam, who had been like heroes of the Elysium, do not take this super well. Fleam kind of
that
warms
Idarian
up
has
to
been
the
dead.
idea.
Wait. Oh, actually, what we also have to say is when we kill the last matron, the whole Elysium has this gigantic vision, and from Idarian's perspective, they get to see the whole history of the campaign. So now everybody knows what's up and who Ulamog is, and that the
Ulamog
matrons
personally
are dead.
introduces himself to every single Elysian.
Yeah.
Just so they never doubt it.
Yeah, and they see every single matron die, they see every single matron lie, they see the incursors. I mean, so now everybody knows everything. There's no more secrets or conspiracy. The revolution, the whole secret is fully out. And you might think that this is the end, but it's really not.
Because as we remember, the incursors were setting the Elysium up for an invasion, and that invasion is still coming. And so essentially a military dictatorship is established in the short term to prepare the Elysium for a battle plan to survive.
I think you mean a revolutionary government. All right.
a military dictatorship established by force by Mecha is established as a temporary measure. And the party essentially prepares to face the devils, who show up in a colossal airship shaped like a giant flying pillar.
In this time, also, there's a little bit of a time cut. I come back playing Brunek now, the joke character from Arc 1 that nobody remembers. Yeah, that guy. He's my character now. It was a lot of fun playing a joke character this deep into the campaign. Thank you, Thea, for putting up with it.
It's okay.
But also, Ulamog contributes a lot to like industrialization of our magical processes and artificing.
Yeah,
so, like,
Darion now is basically Ulamog's avatar.
Now. Yeah, and we start to have like these guns now that are being developed and manufactured that have like this rune of Ulamog that, it's a gun, so it makes it a more efficient weapon, so people want to use it for that reason, but the rune on it means everything killed with the gun, like their soul goes to Ulamog and feeds him. So he's like industrially growing shortening his incubation period and feeding on souls so that he can bust out of his big egg and eat the world except for the Elysium.
Yeah,
because that was the deal. No touchy Elysium.
No touchy Elysium. Everything else is fair game.
Which is like for Ulamog is like, okay, so 98% of the world is fair game. That's fine. You can keep your little corner here.
Yeah.
I will eat the sky and the concept of gravity. You can keep your little.
Yeah, I mean, I won't touch the Elysium, but I can't promise that the Earth will still be livable after I'm done with it. Like the biosphere will be gone. But you do you. The devils show up. They essentially do a fake. Like they don't do a fake. Like no, okay, they don't do it. You basically have a
diplomatic meeting where they try to assassinate us and all the political leadership of the Elysium.
I mean, first they basically explain the situation with how humans are like a precious resource, and the Elysium, and there's a big war coming outside of the Elysium, and the devils would really like to have this big bread basket of like millions of people to pull from to make devils, and they're very willing to basically give up their ally, who instead are trying to avoid the war because the devils see this war as inevitable. And the Elysians say no. So the devils basically pull off a sneak attack on this diplomatic summit and try to bomb the leadership of Elysium into death. Because Mecha and Fleam and another leader, like the Harper leader, are all part of this Supreme Council. The devils is a tough fight. You survive. The leader of the devils here, General Hedigard, launches then this full military invasion, and the party manages to steal one of the ships that are involved in the sneak attack. that has a very convenient ability that they use to sneak, which is an
It can
invisibility.
turn invisible.
It will turn invisible. It's a sneaky, invisible ship. So the plan is hatched. You cannot defeat the devils by force. They're just too powerful. And they have access, like they use portals to basically have a direct connection to the homeland. So they can always teleport in new troops and new
But the
materials.
advantage that we have is that it's a defensive war for us. So
Yeah.
for them, we just need to make it not worth their while. We don't need to go conquer their capital or anything. We just need to ruin their attempt at evading us so that they get tired of trying. Because they've tried 3 times at this point. This would be the 3rd attempt and
Yeah.
the most expensive of the 3 attempts. And if
I mean,
this
I
also
wouldn't call
goes,
the first 2 the attempts, right? Like
it
attempts to
seemed like
conquer
attempts
it.
to me.
No, sorry. What I mean is like there's a difference. Like the first 2 were like destabilizing it to set them up for the invasion. This is the invasion.
Yeah. Well, anyways,
like-
the point is we just need to run them out of patience.
Absolutely.
And we don't actually need to kill them. So yeah, they fly their giant Death Star over the border. It's this giant floating pillar that has like fire shooting out of the bottom of it. It looks kind of like a double mountain. Like imagine if like a mountain and then somebody built a bunch of stuff on the mountain, but then the bottom of the mountain, you pulled out of the ground. So it's kind of diamond shaped.
Yeah,
like
or
that.
like you pull out you take a mountain, you pull it out, you flip it, and then you build a big castle on the flat bottom. That's it. That's the pillar. Yeah. So long story short, we do a Death Star.
We sneak
the
in.
invisible ship flies in.
We fight, we destroy the portal room so that no reinforcements can show up. Then we go to the reactor room. We kill all of Heligard's minions. We kill Heligard. We rig the reactor room to blow. We jump off the side of the ship into the waiting arms of our ship. We jump off the side of the pillar into the waiting arms of our ship and fly on off into the sunset and do a little bit of epilogue and bonding and talk about how the new republic, because the dictatorship is actually just a provisional revolutionary government.
Yeah, make
and
us
we
so
do
done.
Yeah. So we replace it with a republic, and we talk about how the republic is structured and what parties exist, and we even did a little dice simulation on the final election party results, the first Elysian election ever.
Yeah.
And we retire a lot of our PCs. Brunek makes a monster eating restaurant, and Picona helps and devotes herself to the cause of animated objects, which sort of live a somewhat
Basically,
second-class
all
life.
these constructs that have worse that live at the fringes of society now because society is not built for them. People made of paper.
And Oshin goes home and makes up with his family and with his terminally ill brother, who resents him for having left him years ago to join the Harpers and whatnot, and pledges that once his brother, who is very ill at this point, once he passes on, he will, go out and explore this infinite power source that his grandfather created or whatever. But yeah, so that was mostly, especially with some cliff notes at the end, a summary of the plot and some of our feelings of the campaign. Just like the campaign, this retelling has gone on longer than we thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have a lot of feelings to express in our next episode about Age of Extinction, but I think that for tonight we're done. Anything else you want to add?
I mean, I do think we should just give our rough feelings we have about 5 minutes maybe.
Mhm.
We should give our rough feelings. I got a little too invested in it, especially the cat and mouse thing. I felt very thwarted, like I was trying to be smart, but then I couldn't be smart at times because I felt like you kind of metagamed me. That was frustrating. But the campaign really got a lot better for me, especially after the hiatus when we didn't have to cat and mouse and mystery anymore, and we were just free to blow up the world and change the world in ways that we wanted to. And especially towards the end, I thought it was very exciting and rewarding to take this monarchy and this corrupt violence-based system and to reform it into an imperfect republic struggling to be something better after a very violent past. And I loved the characters that I played, especially Idarian. I thought got a really strong narrative and a really strong send-off. Sad for that guy, tragic, sort of anti-hero type character, but still a really strong narrative, really compelling for me sort of story. What about you?
Yeah, No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think that, I had my ups and downs as a DM. I definitely learned during this campaign what I'm not good at as a DM, and I think that like we worked to improve that especially after the hiatus because we had a lot better communication. Check
Yeah.
out our episode about a D&D argument worth having, the only D&D
Yeah.
argument worth having, if you want to know more about that. But essentially, yeah, I think, but like but I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun, especially towards the end. And I think especially like, I want to separate about like mixed feelings maybe about the whole game experience and about my personal DMing thing, but I did have fun. And especially I want to say like the story that we end up writing at the end, I am very proud actually that like it worked out. I'm happy with the story that we told, and like we managed to make it the player's story while also staying true to what I envisioned for this campaign, and I am
Yeah.
happy about that.
Yeah, I think it was really great in the end, and I feel like one of the coolest things about the campaign is it really has your stamp of identity. It's got
Yeah,
this
as an
whole mess of
auteur, as an
yeah,
auteur.
it's got this whole mess of politics in it that reminds me of you. It has this sort of very grounded literalness that reminds me of you. Um, but it's
The
also got
biology,
this
the weird biology.
yeah, this failed entomologist, you're such a zoologist somewhere in you, where you're like, "Oh, and these mushrooms and these things have a and what if the mind flayer parasite was actually a symbiote? And what if we had these weird bug monsters on the borders? And what if every society was based on the reproductive cycle of fantasy monsters?"
Yeah.
Um, and
Welcome to my
I,
breeding core world.
yeah, oh god.
I mean,
Um,
no, to be clear, it's not that at all. Like, I'm really like when we talk about reproduction, we're talking about like like a person ascending to a devil, not.
yes. Um, but I thought it really has your stamp on it, and it really has our stamp on it too. And I think that's D&D never generates improv in general. I feel like tends not to generate the very best version of a narrative, but
Yeah,
often the most personal version of a
yeah,
narrative, and that's really good too.
yeah.
So, um,
Cool.
yeah, and
Yeah,
we didn't get to talk about them very much, but we're going to talk about them in part two. We're going to do a part two with Copernicus and with Picona's player, and we're going to talk about all about the third arc and people's feelings and stuff like that, and their favorite moments. I'm really excited to talk about their characters too because I really enjoyed playing alongside them, and I
yeah,
thought their characters were really great. We just didn't talk about them as much on this episode because they're not here
yeah.
right now to
Absolutely.
represent themselves.
Yeah. Okay. You got any plugs?
Oh my god, man! That last half hour was pretty intense.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let my brain decompress for a second. Let me think about plugs.
Yeah.
Um, well, in light of the next campaign that we're starting, I'm gonna plug the 2024 5e rules are slightly better than the 2014 ones. So if you really care about D&D and you play it a lot, you should get those rules. Otherwise, maybe get a different game. Podcasts about those may be coming out soon. What
Yeah.
about you?
Well, I'm gonna plug what I'm seeing with my eyes right now. I'm seeing the D&D tarot deck, and it's
Ah,
yeah, it's an official Dungeons and Dragons product. It's a tarot deck with very beautiful art, and you can use it in different ways to incorporate it into your games. I think it's a cool gadget, and we have incorporated into one of our games, and that was a lot of fun. So I think you have to really think it through, but I think it's a cool gadget to have.
well, alrighty, folks. That'll just about do it for our longest ever and 10th episode. If you want more, you can find
Woo!
us on youtube.com/@a-friendly-orbit, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Which
If
I
you happen to
did.
have any...
It's on. I say I follow. I'm following ourselves with my private account.
And if you happen to have any astral echoes you want to share with us, you can email us at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com, all one word.
Ceres isn't following us yet. Alrighty, Ceres. I'll talk to you later. And to all of our fellow Voyagers, we'll catch you out there amongst the stars.